Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get in state here. When you tap in to your goal achieved, type in the chat where you're from. I'm so stoked you're here. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I want to really hone in on a pretty amazing topic, and that is risk taking. Do you see yourself as a risk taker? Would you consider yourself a risk taker? What's that look like for you? I know for me, I prided myself on the fact that I didn't look at myself as a risk taker. And I even thought to myself, you know what? I think I manifested Dave, like my husband, because he is such a risk taker, right? He can, see a business opportunity and want to be a part of it. It doesn't matter what it looks like. He could, even if we had like a date night and we went to a casino, right? I was like, give me my $20. I'm going to go sit at the penny machine. And he's like, I'm taking $1,000 and I'm going to play poker. Right. And I just was always like, oh my gosh, that's such a risk. What if you lose? And he's like, but what if I win? Or what if I just like have the most incredible time and I've spent that money on other things, right? And I'm going like, oh my gosh, right? What do you think of when I say risk? For me, I would have told you that it was like talking about failure. Like you don't talk about that stuff. Does that resonate with you? It felt like a bad thing, like a negative thing. Like I would never be on the losing end of talking about something like risk. Is anyone listening right now loss averse? Risk averse? Have you heard of loss aversion? It was actually a theory that was developed in like the 1970s, and it demonstrates that for the most part, when given a choice, people would rather not lose something than gain something. Loss aversion, okay? And it's often talked about in relation to like economics. But you see, it's at play in all different kinds of scenarios, all different areas of our life. And some people stay in relationships that are like destructive rather than walking away. Others might gamble themselves into a deeper and deeper hole, trying to win back their losses rather than walking away. Other people remain in careers that are literally stifling their souls and depressing them instead of making the leap into something different. Okay? People would rather not lose something than gain something. The pain of losing is more acute, it seems, perceived, than the pleasure of gaining. Does this speak to you? Is this you? Are there any areas of your life that you're having a hard time cutting your losses? Is there a job, a relationship, a project that you keep investing time and effort and resources into it, in spite of the fact that your investment is no longer even paying you any sort of return? In fact, it's costing you because the alternative seems even scarier. Every day we get to make decisions, the decisions that will cost us. And it can be, yes, so freaking scary to walk away from what is familiar. even if it's a bad thing that you're familiar with, and trade it for the unknown. So scary. Yes, it's a risk. But think about it this way: the choice to remain in the losing situation also involves risk. Either way, you're risking. I would argue, though, that by being in the situation that's not serving you, potentially is a much greater risk than the alternative. You are taking untold risks by continuing down a negative path. They might be financial risks. They might be other material risks. You say, I'm not really willing to risk losing my house, losing my job, losing my status, losing my whatever, losing my bank account. Or they might be emotional ones. The situation feels safer is very likely, that does feel safer is very likely not the one that's safe at all. So think of the gambler who could have lost just $50 or $100, but then finds himself owing thousands, hundreds of thousands, all because he was trying to save himself from a minor pain. Everything's the law of relativity, everything's all relative. What are you comparing it to? But if you're going to keep digging the hole, you could look at it as gambling. You could look at it as working in a job that's literally eating your soul every day, 40 hours a week. And you are unhappy. But then you go, gosh, I've worked here for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. My pension, right? In comparison, the unknown, you have an idea of something that you could go out on your own and do. It even excites you. But what if it doesn't work out? But what if it does? And you just, you and this brilliant idea or this store, whatever you want to do, turns out to make you millions. I remember, so it'll be 5 years this year that I resigned at my super comfy corporate job that I was very gracefully climbing the ladder at. And I will never forget that moment. So it would have been about 5.5 years ago that I said to my husband, I'm not meant to be in this anymore. Can't describe it. I just know I'm meant to not do this. I'm meant to be, do, and have more. And I'm meant to impact the world in a completely different way. I can't describe it, but this is it. And he looked at me and he was like, are you nuts? You worked there for 15 years, your pension, your benefits, right? And I can tell you, though, when I finally made a decision, drew the line in the sand, and said, I am willing to risk losing what, again, it was the perceived paycheck and the stability. I think that's the word we used, even though I could have been walked out of that job any moment. Right? Like, stable is not stable, right? I think we can agree this, right? I could have been walked out at any moment, not been stable. But like, I was giving up the stability of my pension to out and work for myself. Pension, right? But guess what happened? And this is where I talk about MSIs, guys, multiple streams of income. Okay. Put your money to work. If you're like me and you're like, oh my God, my pension. I talk to people every day that are like this. They hate their jobs, but they won't leave it because their pension, right? Take your pension and invest it. Guess what? My investment now, when I took it out, has made more than that pension sitting there for 30 years and making money in the pension, right, would have made. Okay. It's made that now in 5 years. It had actually made that in 2 years. 2 years, I had like quadrupled it. I 10x'd it. Okay. So there's that if you're feeling risk averse for that one. But you can relate it. If it's not your job, you can relate it back to a relationship. You could relate it to the money that's in your bank account. You could relate it back to your health. But as humans, we make decisions based on gaining pleasure or avoiding pain. And it turns out, research is showing we would rather accept the pain. Right? You might not be gambling with money, but what are you gambling with and why? How might your losses on that front be further compounded 1, 5, 10 years down the road? Are you really, 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 really willing to live with that? Because no matter how strong the urge may be, you don't have to. You don't. I'm proof that you don't have to. And I'm not made from anything different than you are. People would say to me, oh, you're so brave. You're so brave. I wish I could do what I'm like, then do it. Freaking do it. We're not made from anything different. The energy that is flowing to and through me is the exact same energy that's flowing to and through you, to and through Oprah, to and through, I don't know, anybody inspirational that you're like, oh, they're made from different stuff. No, they're not. They're not. They're made from the exact same energy. They live in a meat stick that vibrates at a high rate. They have paradigms. Right? You don't have to live the way you're living. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And it's that simple. And it can be that easy. Some ancient wisdom for you there. But it's powerful. Guys, risk is unavoidable. The key is to take the right risks. Forget about what happened up until this point. Cut your losses. Stop them from continuing. Decide. And things might be different and better now if you had done them earlier. But you can't do anything about the past. It's done and over with. Move on. Decide now to stop doing whatever you're doing. Don't get yourself all in a knot over it. Decide. Accept it. Move on from it. No grudges. Nothing. You're deciding now to make your life better moving forward. Period. Start now. Make a move in a positive direction and take a risk that is going to move you forward, not backwards. And in far less time than you think, you will be glad that you did it. Because the law of gestation says any seed that's planted and nurtured must come to form. Must. It must. And sometimes, more often than not, you have to take a few risks in order to get there. But quit playing it safe. because I promise you, it is the risk takers that end up being the winners every time. Every time. Thank you so much for joining me.